This is a bit of a weird video, but one I've wanted to make for a while. One of the most common questions I get is which American Express card should they get? I might do that again as a separate video, but the short answer is arguably all of them, or at least the ones that come with a bonus. There obviously is a strategy of ordering and making sure that it fits into your life, but otherwise a lot of people do go through a lot of them. A big part of this is due to American Express's terms and conditions, and also the other constraints involved. For most of their cards, officially at least, you can only get the intro bonus once. You may not be eligible to receive a welcome bonus if you have or have had this card or previous versions of this card. In contrast, other issuers like Chase, you can get them every 2 years. Here, technically, it's once in a lifetime. It's very common to go through different ones and kind of figure out which ones might be the ones you want to keep long term. Another factor that might limit you is the 4-5-6 rule. So there is that question of whether a card might be worth a short-term or long-term spot on your roster. If that's confusing, think of basketball or any other sport. Even though you would want as many players as possible, there are constraints that are set by the league, so for basketball, it's 15 players. The more interesting question is which cards you should avoid, and we'll look at 3 different things. The first group is timing-based, and it's given the new meta. Number 2 is focus-based. The final group are cards I've avoided, but might make sense for you. Big favor, hit the like button to help with the algorithm, and if you are new and you like credit cards and travel, then consider subscribing. One of the biggest recent changes is the family rules with cards. This has very much changed the meta and the strategies that you should consider. For example, Delta personal cards are in a pretty weird spot. As of filming, there's 4 options: the Delta Blue, Gold, Platinum, and Reserve. In the past, you would get the one that made sense for you given the current timing, and that's it. Now that strategy arguably doesn't work. If we take a look at the terms for the Delta Blue, you're not eligible to receive a welcome offer if you have or have had this card, pretty standard there, but also other cards like the Delta Gold, Delta Platinum, and the Delta Reserve. If you look at the Delta Gold card, you see something similar. Not eligible if you have or have had this card, Delta Platinum, and Delta Reserve. But there is no mention of the Delta Blue, and the same thing applies when we move up the ladder. For the Delta Platinum, it's this card, the Delta Platinum, and also the Delta Reserve. Finally, with the top card of the Delta Reserve, it's the old school language. No mention of the other cards, just if you have or have had this card. I definitely realize it's not the most interesting to read terms and conditions, but I do think that this is one of the things that can cost you a few $1,000s in the long term. If we use poker chips as an example, how much value you get depends on the order you pick them. You have 5, 25, 100, and 500. In our case, if you pick the 500 first, then you're not eligible for any of the other 3. If you go for the 100 first, then you're not eligible for the 25 or the 5, and so on. So given that the mathematical best strategy, if you are trying to optimize, is to get the $5 first, and then the 25, and then the 100, and then the 500. In our case, the Delta Blue, Delta Gold, Delta Platinum, and then finally the Delta Reserve. Obviously, there are exceptions, so if you're flying Delta a ton and you want lounge access. Main thing though is that I would be cognizant of the opportunity cost because it can be a pretty expensive one. So in that sense, if you are trying to maximize value, there are certain Delta cards you'd want to avoid depending on your timing. There also might be ones you want to skip because maybe they don't offer enough value, and I'll talk more about that with my experience later on in the video. Also, even if you are focused on Delta Lounge access, I would probably consider the Platinum. You still do run into the same issue with the core family cards, but it feels a bit easier to manage. So you pretty much have the same rules for the green, the gold, and the platinum. Not going to read the terms, but pretty much exactly the same idea. You'd want to get the green first, and then the gold, and then the platinum. Unlike the Delta cards, there are less constraints. Main reason being that the green, gold, and platinum are not hampered by the 4-5-6 rule. For most people, it's 5 cards that you can actively hold that have fixed limits. If you already have other cards like the Bonvoy or Hilton's or the cashback cards, you probably cannot work your way through Delta fast enough, but American Express, the core ones, green, gold, platinum, you can. Also, if anything, this might be the move, especially if you are worried about American Express adding additional rules in the future. If you are looking to apply for the gold or platinum, I'd recommend checking Card Match for elevated offers. We do have a post walking through this, and I'll also link it down below, and it should pop up if you Google Ask Sebi Card Match. These are targeted and not everyone's going to get them, but it's also how people get 90K for the gold and 150K for the platinum. Card Match is also one of the few ways to pull those offers for existing customers. With that said, if you are someone that wants to learn about these cards or pretty much any other cards out there, whether American Express, Chase, someone else, and you want to support the channel, we do have links on the website, asksebi.com, and also down below in the description box. Make sure the links are competitive and that the cards make sense for you, but otherwise it is a huge way to support the channel, so thank you guys in advance. Super fast, but currently there are some cards that do not have the family rule. This can change in the future, and I'll pin a comment down below if it does, but a great example would be the Hilton cards. If you go to the terms for the American Express Hilton, it does not mention any of the other cards. At the same time, Hilton does sit in a pretty unique position for team travel. Main reason being that long term, once you run out of other bonuses, you kind of want to have either the Hilton Surpasses or the Aspires, and maybe both and upgrade around them. It's one of the few ways to keep getting value. It is a coupon book and it can be a bit annoying, but if you don't have any other choice, at least it's something. Okay, so with that said, there are family rules and which ones you should avoid given where you are in the family, but what about other cards? It's a bit of a loaded question because it does depend on what you're prioritizing. We'll do Team Cashback first and then Team Travel, and then myself, and hopefully that kind of sets the stage for me to not get canceled for my choices. For Team Cashback, you do have a ton of great options. Blue Cash Everyday and Blue Cash Preferred are great workhorses, and people love those cards. For our purpose though, the more critical question isn't which cards to consider, but which cards maybe don't have cashback ability or cashback options. Arguably, all the MR membership reward earning cards are still in play. You might get less value, or you might have to get other cards like the Schwab Platinum to maximize value, but technically works. Delta cards are interesting though, but they might be a skip. So there is that argument for Sky Miles to redeem for Delta gift cards, and then maybe use the gift cards as gifts. In that case, you could argue the Delta Blue, Gold, and Platinum for at least the first year, and if you don't mind the credits, it's pretty nice. The Delta Reserve though is probably a stretch and is hard to recommend. Long term, and especially if you don't like the credits and you don't travel, it might be a stretch and the juice might not be worth the squeeze. For Team Travel, you run into the same problem. And if anything, it feels a little bit more pronounced. If you already have the Gold card and you're earning 4x MR for US supermarkets, and you transfer to partners to get 2 cents per point, an extra 100 or 200 in cash back for an intro bonus is nice, but probably doesn't move the needle. Especially if the alternative is a free anywhere night for Hilton alongside with their coupon book. For a lot of people in this camp, the free night for Hilton or the Bonvoy Brilliant one moves the needle a lot more than the cashback alternative. And that's kind of where the opportunity cost comes into play. Unless you're very early, let's say you're a student, you're probably going to avoid the cashback cards because they just don't do enough. Especially in the end game when you are doing more travel, it might actually be less financially beneficial because it's going to cost you more. That sets the stage, and hopefully the next bit is not me doxing myself. So with all of that said, which cards have I avoided or skipped? I got into credit cards for a weird reason. I started with cashback, but then moved towards Team Travel. The dive down the travel rabbit hole was when I met Mandy 10 years ago. I didn't realize, but she really likes travel. Like probably a lot of you, I want to travel, but I don't want to pay the sticker price. For me, the point of points is experiences that I might be able to afford, but I don't feel like splurging on. I'd rather spend 11K on a Pepsi and get a subsidized first class flight out of it, rather than spending $11,000 on the flight. I can either spend this on a flight or spend it on something else and then kind of get a flight out of it and maybe add a bit more money. Given that, my setups have focused on more cards that give more upside rather than straight cash back. Especially so because there are non-American Express cards that also do cash back pretty well without the opportunity cost and constraints. There's a reason why I really like the Citi Custom Cash card and why I have a lot of freedoms and freedom flexes. Unsurprisingly, I have avoided most cashback cards, and I don't see myself getting them in the future. This includes the Blue Cash Everyday, Blue Cash Preferred, Morgan Stanley Blue Cash Preferred, Cash Magnet, and also the Schwab Investor. I have had the Everyday card, but that technically earns membership reward points. One I did skip though was the EDP, the Everyday Preferred. There also is another membership reward earning card that I haven't gotten, and I don't think I'll be able to get in the future. So over the years, I have gotten pretty much every flavor of the Platinum at some point. Whether that's the normal one or otherwise known as the Vanilla, Charles Schwab, Morgan Stanley, and for people that have been around the block, Mercedes-Benz, and also Ameriprise. The one that has evaded me is the Goldman Sachs option. It pretty much has the same perks, so not really any reason to go for it. Eligibility is 10 million in assets or being an employee. On the travel side, there's two that I avoided and now not eligible for. First one is Delta Blue, and for me before, the juice wasn't really worth the squeeze, and right now, same thing. Also, even if I want to get it, I can't get it now due to the family rules. Same idea for the Bonvoy Bevy, which wasn't too exciting to begin with anyways. Not eligible because I have had the Bonvoy Brilliant, which I really like. So given all of this, outside of being a weird completionist, I'm pretty much done with American Express. I feel like I am at the finish line and I've checked off the list. That's why when people ask me what American Express cards I'm applying for, there's not really anything worth it for me. Even on the business side, pretty much the same case. This one might anger people, but it's fine. So for me, I haven't gotten and don't see myself getting the Blue Business Cash and the Blue Business Plus. I think those are great cards if you do want to be in that ecosystem and you're more focused on maximizing your spends, and you also don't want to stack Aspire cards. For me, given where I am and the other options I have that are also at 2x or 2%, it just doesn't make sense. I'd rather have another Hilton Aspire and the coupon book and the free night over another 2% card. One concerning one to me is Hilton, and the main reason is because I don't remember if I've ever gotten the Hilton business. I guess I can find out by going through my credit card graveyard, but yeah, not really the top priority in any way. Especially so after the recent change and the fact that they got rid of that 15K free night, which would be a main reason to go for it. I definitely did have the Bonvoy business though, and got rid of it to add another Hilton card. Ended up going through all the Delta business cards, which were pretty good. The only ones left are the store partner cards, like the Lowe's, Amazon Business Prime, and Amazon Business. And I mean, I think there are cases for those cards for other people, but for me, doesn't really make sense. The Amazon Prime is a good card, but the Chase version is a bit better and you don't have that constraint. So for these Amazon cards, you are getting 5% on AWS and other services that might cost a lot of money. With the Amex one though, you are capped at 120K in spend in any calendar year, which can be pretty constraining. And yes, I realize that sounds pretty absurd to non-business owners, but bear with me. On the personal side, you also do get 5% on AWS, but you're not capped off in any way. So that's pretty much the better choice. As long as you're comfortable using a personal card and then doing an expense report afterwards, you're good to go. Main takeaway, these are the cards I skipped on my way through American Express, but otherwise, I do feel pretty done. Again, if you want to learn about cards, we have links on the website, AskSabby.com, and down below in the description box. If you made it to this point, leave a trophy emoji in the comments down below and I'll try to heart it and also respond. 2 questions. Number 1, at what point would you feel like you've gotten that trophy and that you're ready to retire and that you're done with American Express? Number 2, which ones did you skip or avoid, or would you skip or avoid? Let me know and everyone else know in the comments down below. Big favorite, thumbs up, consider subscribing, but otherwise hope you liked it. See you next time. I think the most absurd part of this is that I actually have a few of these. This is not the only one. See you guys.